Hello and welcome to our second video on biology. In our previous video, we looked at living organisms and characteristics of living organisms as well as cell component and structure and organization of life. In this video, our topic will be evolution among living things, part 1. First off, we'll be looking at the classification of living things. Living things are mainly arranged into groups, and these groups are what we want to look at. The science that concerns itself with the study of the general principle of classification is what we know as systematics. Now, systematics is subdivided into two. The first one is taxonomy, and the second one is the nomenclature. We'll take taxonomy and go over it first. Taxonomy involves classifying organisms into levels of hierarchies. We have from the highest to the lowest. Now, in the hierarchy of living organism, we have the kingdom, the phylum, the class, order, family, genus, and species. The kingdom is a group of related phyla, and the kingdom represents the highest and largest level of classification. It has plenty varieties of organisms and it shows many differences and very few similarities. Now, the phyla is a group of related classes. The class is a group of related orders. The order is a group of related families. The family is a group of related genera. The genus, or in plural, the genera, is a group of related species. The species itself is the smallest unit of classification. It's at the lowest hierarchy of living organisms. It usually has few organisms that are very similar, having very few dissimilarity, very few differences. We can therefore just say that the species is a group of organisms that are closely related and can interbreed freely to produce fertile offspring. Now, the second subdivision of systematics is binomial nomenclature. This is the system that gives living organisms their names. It comprises of two names. The first one is usually the generic name that is from their genus, and the second one is a specific name from their species. Unlike the local names for living organisms, these scientific names tend to be generally accepted in the world because there's no ambiguity in the sense that what an Igbo man calls a goat is not what a Yoruba man calls a goat, and it is not what an Hausa man calls a goat. So these are different names, and we cannot be calling a goat these three different names. Rather, we make use of a scientific name that is generally accepted. Now, for instance, man is known as Homo sapien, lion is known as Panthera leu, okra is known as Hibiscus esculentus. Now, there's something we need to note about scientific names. Now, the generic names, the name that comes first has to start with a capital letter, while the specific name has to start with a small letter. When this is done, these names are either italicized or they are underlined separately. Very, very important. Let's look deeper into the classification of living things. Let's take the kingdoms first. Between the years 1753 and 1758, Carolus Linnaeus, a scientist, classified living things very simply into two kingdoms: the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom. But as time has gone and advanced more, there's a more modern system of classification, and this modern system of classification organized living organisms into 5 kingdoms. These 5 kingdoms are the Monera kingdom, the Protista kingdom, the fungi, the plantae, and the animalia. In the course of this topic, in this part, we'll be looking at the first 3 kingdoms: the Monera kingdom, the Protista kingdom, and the fungi kingdom. So come close, yes. Listen and pay attention. This is very, very important. The first kingdom we'll be looking at is the Monera kingdom. Under the Monera kingdom, there is the phylum Schizophyta. An example is the bacteria. And there is the phylum Cyanophyta. An example is the blue-green algae. Now let's look at the features of these living organisms under the Monera kingdom. 1, they are microscopic and simple living organisms. That is to say that they are very, very tiny. Sometimes we can't even see them with our bare eyes. They are very small, hence why they are said to be microscopic organisms. The second one is that they are unicellular. In our last video, we mentioned that when an organism is made up of only one cell, it is said to be unicellular. This feature just gives us an insight on how small they are likely to look and why they are really simple living organisms. In contrast to the complexity of life that we looked at, they just have one cell and living for them is very simple. The third feature is that they are prokaryotes. Being prokaryotic means that they lack a definite nuclei. In the cell structure, we see that the cell is made up of the cytoplasm and the nuclei. Now, these unicellular organisms, these organisms in the kingdom Monera, they lack that definite nuclei. It is not there, it is non-existent. Now, the fourth feature is that their chromosomes lie freely in the cytoplasm. These chromosomes are supposed to be inside the nuclear membrane, inside the nucleus. Now, when there's no nuclei, the chromosomes that are supposed to carry the genetic materials just lie freely in the cytoplasm. In the area of reproduction, since they are unicellular organisms, they are just simple living, their reproduction process is going to also be simple. They reproduce asexually by a method known as the binary fission. Binary fission basically entails the division of the parent cell. That unicellular organism just divides itself to give off another living organism that is also unicellular. And that's about Monera kingdom. The next kingdom is the Protista kingdom. In the Protista kingdom, we have the phylum Protozoa and the phylum Protophyta. Examples of organisms under this phyla, under this kingdom as well, is the Amoeba, the Paramecium, the Chlamydomonas, the Euglena, the Diatoms, and the Chlorella. Now let's look at their features. Just like the Monera kingdom, they are also unicellular organisms. They are either free-living or parasitic. Parasitic meaning that sometimes they require a host to attach itself for the purpose of nutrition. The second feature is that they are also microscopic organisms. They are tiny, we cannot see them with our naked eyes. Now, unlike the Monera kingdom, the Protista kingdom organisms are eukaryotes. That is to say, they have a definite nuclei, giving us an idea that their cell structure is more complex than those of the Monera kingdom. The fourth feature is that they are mainly aquatic or endoparasitic. Endoparasitic means that they rely on bodily fluids of other living organisms to feed. Another unique feature is that they can move about from one place to another using a hair-like structure. Some use the flagella and some use the cilia, or a singular form, the cilium, while others use a pseudopodia. This pseudopodia is usually referred to as a false foot. A very striking feature in the Protista kingdom is that some protists behave plant-like. These organisms, they are the ones that are grouped under the Protophyta. Why we say that they are plant-like is because they have a cellulose cell wall and also have chloroplasts. And we can remember that chloroplasts contain a green pigment known as chlorophyll that is used for the manufacture of food in the process of photosynthesis. Now, this is giving us an insight that their cells are resembling those of the plants. Example of the living organisms that exhibit this uniqueness is the Chlamydomonas, the Chlorella, and the Diatoms. Still under the Monera kingdom, still under the Protista kingdom, there are still some that behave animal-like. These ones are under the phylum Protozoa. Now, why we say they behave animal-like is because they feed on already made food. They have no cellulose cell wall and they don't have a chloroplast. Example of these ones are the Amoeba and the Paramecium. Now, beautifully uniquely, is the Euglena. Now, while other living organisms under the Protista kingdom, while they are either behaving plant-like or animal-like, the Euglena behaves both plant-like and animal-like. On the plant-like side, it has a chloroplast which enables it to produce its own food. But on the animal-like side, it has no cellulose cell wall. Instead, it has a plasma membrane that is known as the pellicle, and that is an animal feature. And that's about the protista kingdom. The next kingdom we'll be looking at is the fungi kingdom. In the fungi kingdom, we have a single phylum. We have the phylum Talophyta. Now, examples of living organisms that are found under the fungi kingdom include the mushroom, mucor, rhizopus, toadstools, bread molds, yeasts, etc. Let's take a look at features that distinguish them from the other kingdoms that we've mentioned before. One, they are multicellular eukaryotic plant-like organisms. Now, we remember that so far in the Monera and the Protista, we've been seeing that they are unicellular organisms, and the Monera is a prokaryote, while the Protista is an eukaryote. Now, a recap of what this means is that the fungi kingdom, being multicellular, is made up of more than one cells, and being eukaryotic, it means that it has a definite cell structure and a defined nuclei. The next feature of the fungi kingdom is that they have no true roots, stems, and leaves. And number 3, they lack chlorophyll. This is to tell you that they are not autotrophs. They don't produce their own food. They don't go through photosynthesis. Now, for their nutrition, they are mostly saprophytes on decaying or dead organic materials. While some are saprophytes, there are some that are parasitic. They find a host, attach themselves, and derive nutrients from this host. Now, another feature of the fungi kingdom is that they have a vegetative body that is made up of fine and delicate threads we call the hyphae. Now, they are mostly found in moist habitats, in moist environments. That is where you can find fungi. For reproduction, fungi reproduces both asexually by spore formation and sexually by the production of male and female gametes. And that just wraps up the features of fungi habitat, of the fungi kingdom, and also this particular video. Don't rush out yet. We have the remaining 2 kingdom classifications, that is the Plantae and the Animalia. We've only just looked at the first 3. So sit back and relax while I take you through the complete classifications.